Nitin, you've operated on these issues at some of the most rarefied levels. You were director of World Resources Institute India. You're now, of course, managing the research arm of Ashoka. And you are applying artificial intelligence to figure out how to deal with these incentives, with the metrics that are needed, and thus to reassure the investors. Is any of the things that you've heard today, do they ring a bell of familiarity in what's happening in your own country?
Well, I guess, thank you, Patrick, and the panelists and the speakers before me. There's a little bit of time left, but I have the advantage that a lot has been said already. I think the way we're sort of looking at this in India is to try and look at, what are the different roles of the different stakeholders that they have to play, and how does it come together so that not only does it give assurance to the investor, which is critical, but it gives assurance to the ultimate off-taker, which is the farmer. And so I think it's okay to create large pots of money, but at the same time, if you have to take uptake of that money, then in that case, there must be a demand for that color of money that's out there, which means that the money must be able to fund the kind of things that, as Sarah was saying, that people on the ground have been involved in deciding what it is that they need to do with it. And that engagement is key. So we've sort of taken a slightly different approach to this. In fact, based on the work that our partners in ICRAF have worked with us in our program in ARREST, is to look at and try to understand the demand side a lot more. The demand side of finance itself a lot more, which means that we have to understand the end user and the customer. Because if we are able to identify those needs correctly, then my suspicion is that there will be uptake, there'll be a demand for the requisite finance, and there'll be an uptake of that finance. So we're looking at it very much from the end user perspective, and we feel that by creating that kind of finance, we'll be able to scale it because it'll have the inherent characteristic that it actually represents the needs and the requirements of the end users. So given that, maybe what I can do is I can just sort of quickly run through one mechanism that we've used. So let me see if I can pull this up. Yeah. So one of the things that we've looked at, in fact, Kai Mausch at ICRAF did all that wonderful work to identify what are the aspirations of people on the ground, including farmers. And in fact, you find that only a small percentage of the work that they do and their entire revenue stream actually comes from farming. The world is changing. The question is, how does one add value so that it leads to adaptation and restoration of the land that they have, to use that and to add value to it, and at the same time increase their income? And that's where I feel a lot of innovation is required. So we took several approaches to this. One of the approaches was that we started prioritizing jobs. There is a fair amount of service economy out there. People are looking for employment. And then how could we actually scale adaptation and sequestration in a manner that can actually create a large number of jobs? And in fact, in peninsular India, we found that we could generate over 400 million man-days of employment for over 4 million households up to 2027 across several districts in India. Now, that's using many techniques in which the farmer is engaged in making the decisions, whether it's agroforestry or A&R or conservation or community-centric efforts or management of invasive species. Let's focus in on just one of them for a second. We have a program which talks about managing invasive species, starting from removal, all the way to crafts, all the way to including them in building materials, all the way to including them in making plywood kinds of boards and so on. And that gives the ability for entrepreneurs to enter the sector who can be financed, and again, that meets the need that you can actually provide for value addition for the farmers to even have the incentive or the inclination to create the demand for the finance that is required. We've identified 13 million hectares of land just outside the protected areas in peninsular India, with 100 million households over there. And this program, working with ICRAF, the Environmental Defense Fund, Columbia University, and also Foundation for Ecological Security, has created those data sets that actually provide the information to the financier so that they know that there is an upside in this, because there is a scale that we're already planning in from day one, and where the scaling is by looking at scaling of the demand. And finally, this is what you get when you actually have artisans and wonderful things that you can create by adding value. These are actual, each of these elephants is actually an elephant from the Bilirangan Hills area that we work in. It's a specific elephant. And this is made out of lantana, an invasive, which we manage. And the artisans have created this at a very high cost, which is sold. And the elephant family has helped us put this right here, outside of local Buckingham Palace. So the type of value addition that we can do by using the resources available must add that kind of value so that there is an incentive for people to actually be engaged in adaptation and therefore demand the kind of finance that is needed to support that kind of work. And I think I'll stop there.
Nitin, thank you very much. I love the idea of these elephants representing, symbolizing what is happening when you're managing demand. And this reminds me of an experience I had in Indonesia many years ago of seeing villages that had followed a similar trajectory and that had achieved a good livelihood by specializing in the production of wooden Harley-Davidson motorcycles in all sizes, from key rings to full-size models. It worked. What was particularly interesting there as well is that they were using an invasive tree species to do so, so they were adding value to something. So it seems sometimes that the good ideas are just struggling to be recognized rather than struggling to be implemented because they're already happening in the landscape.